Earlier this week at the State House, we reacted in real time to the governor's state of the state. Today, we're stepping back to talk about what it actually means and what happens next.
Bartholomew Town.
We thank Half Street Group for their support of local journalism here in Rhode Island. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience, message, and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. Welcome into Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Governor McKee delivering his State of the State address on Tuesday night, really offering up what is in sum an affordability agenda. And at the end of the day, the breakdown of the governor's speech is pretty straightforward in my mind. Number one, this was clearly a speech that was signaled towards potential Democrat primary voters as the governor faces a challenge from former CVS executive Helena Bonanno Folks and potentially / likely Speaker of the House Joe Shekarchi. Also, most followers of Rhode Island politics at least expect a very good chance for Speaker Shekarchi to get into this governor's race. Look, at the end of the day, McKee laid out an agenda that hit on a theme that has been recurring in a number of different political circles. We're going to break down some of the details of the speech in terms of how it impacts the budget of the state going forward and just in general, the political vibe of the state going forward. Veteran reporter Steve Klamkin will join me in just a few moments, but I want to set the table with this. You can call it an abstract, you can call it a breakdown or a breakout. No matter how you frame it, here is what the governor's speech actually represented. And I want to compare that to some of the remarks that we heard from other people across the political spectrum. Number one, the governor identifying the household, the home, as kind of the centerpiece of all political, all governmental discussion. He, on a number of occasions, referenced his own household or the home as, again, that kind of ground zero mentality. I think that's really important to shift some of the concepts that we hear, some of the global and national and obviously local issues back to the most baseline and basic level of the house. And Governor McKee contesting that the greatest threat to the household right now, and I think accurately so, I think most of us would agree, is affordability. He outlined a number of different responses to the affordability crisis across housing, across public transit, across healthcare, kind of all the major sectors, really digging into this notion of we've got to create jobs and that are applicable to industries of the future. To do that, we're going to try to stimulate economic development, and we're going to provide training opportunities at the post-secondary and even in some cases inside the high school level of education. And in the governor's mind, at least according to the speech, that's the number one pathway out of the affordability crisis, is to raise incomes. The major challenge to affordability, according to the governor, Donald Trump and the policies of the Trump administration, which, I mean, look, no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, you have to acknowledge that economic policies of the Trump administration have had an immediate negative impact on a whole lot of Rhode Islanders, particularly when you take a look at health insurance or SNAP benefits, and obviously on a macro level when we see how everything kind of maths out with tariffs and other economic instruments that have been deployed by Trump. But the governor made it very clear. The household is the center of gravity. The greatest threat to that, the greatest challenge right now is affordability and the crisis of affordability. And the reason why we have affordability more than anything else is Donald J. Trump, the president of the United States, and the policies of the Trump administration. Now, what I think is really interesting is before the State of the State was the People's State of the State. That was a little smaller this year than it was in years past, but it's essentially a rally held this year in the Rotunda outside of the General Assembly chambers. And this was, again, kind of an activist, advocate type of event, advocating for, in particular, the plight of the unhoused, but specifically an affordability agenda. Now, that aligns with Governor McKee. You want to call the activists, you want to call the advocates progressives, you can frame it however you like. I don't really like that term. I don't really like that word in general. but let's go ahead and use it for simplicity. So you see an alignment between progressives and the governor in terms of the major challenge of the moment, which is affordability. And what's even more interesting is the Republicans in their State of the State rebuttal delivered by Minority Leader Mike Chippendale. They also identified affordability as the major issue. The difference, of course, is the causation element. All right, progressives, their main argument is that state government is simply not doing enough to intervene, and frankly, probably federal government as well, not doing enough to intervene in this crisis in any number of ways. McKee, again, he's saying affordability is the crisis and it's Trump's fault. The Republicans are saying, hey, incomes have barely grown in Rhode Island, yet state government has become more and more and more inflated. The budget continuing to increase in dramatic fashion. So you have a rare moment where there's consensus across the, at least Rhode Island political spectrum, as to what the major challenge of the moment is. Of course, that is mostly challenged, or the challenge becomes most relevant in terms of how you find solutions. And the governor making it very clear that he wants to rebrand himself. He wants to reposition himself not as a guy who was lieutenant governor, who rose to governor and encountered the Washington Bridge, but as a sturdy, in fact, in his mind, immovable firewall against the policies of the Trump administration, which he makes the argument is leading to significant enhancement, at least, if not altogether, the causation of the affordability crisis. So that's kind of my takeaway. Now, look, I spoke with a lot of people before and after the speech, inside and outside government, and there's a variety of different mindsets about this speech. You talk to some members of the General Assembly, as I did, and look, there's a real push for a millionaire's tax, or whatever you want to call it, a tax the rich moment. A lot of senators wearing green trying to signal their support for this. You didn't hear it mentioned in the speech. Now, we're recording this on Thursday, January 15th in the morning. Later today, the Department of Administration will present their budget, and that's where we'll really have a chance to know how all of the pieces of the McKee agenda put forth fit together in practical terms from a fiscal standpoint. And once we have that information, we'll be able to get more reaction from the General Assembly. We'll do exactly that next week as Speaker of the House Joe Shekarchi will join me here on Bartholomew Town for a reaction to the specifics of the governor's budget. Again, today focused more on themes, but we'll dig a little bit deeper when we come back as I'm joined by veteran reporter Steve Klamkin here on Bartholomew Town. Bartholomew Town is brought to you by Newport Film. We thank them for their support. Visit newportfilm.com for all the latest screening details. Steve Klamkin is a veteran reporter here in southern New England who has covered, 275 states of the state addresses.
Oh, please.
And
a couple of dozen, at least, having been a reporter here for 26 years, and prior to that, I spent 5 years working for the state.
Yeah,
it was during the time of Lincoln Almond was the governor, and that was for about 5 years. And so I've seen my fair share.
Yeah, you definitely you know the business. You were there on Tuesday night during the governor's State of the State address on Press Row. Your initial takeaways right now, as the governor puts forth this affordability agenda in an election year, what resonated most to you as somebody who's seen not only a lot of McKee speeches, and covered McKee on a daily basis for years, but also just kind of in that lineage of states of the state that have taken place?
I think he's shifted a great deal from where we were a year ago. I think that a year ago, it was a spanking new second Trump administration. And I think Governor McKee was satisfied to try to get along with the new Trump administration. I think we've seen a big shift here that, from that standpoint, I think he has been listening. And, I don't know if he's taken Trump to court as much as the as the attorney general, and he and Peter Nerona don't get along at all. So, I wonder how much interplay there is there, if any. But he certainly changed his tune as far as dealing with the federal administration and what's turned into the Trump regime. He's slammed the president several times, but gently, quietly, not in an bombastic way as we've seen in other instances with other governors. So that, I think, is what stood out to me most of all. I think there are a number of social programs that he's tried to through the budget that he's releasing later today. We're speaking on Thursday, a couple of days after the speech, but just prior to the release of his budget proposal. But we all know he proposes and the legislature disposes, and the budget can look far different by the time it comes up for a vote later this year.
Right. We've still got to obviously hear today's Department of Administration announcement, what the reaction is initially from House and Senate leadership, what the Finance Committee wants to do with things, and then obviously tax returns in April and May estimated revenue conference before we even know really what's going on.
And you were there in the clutch of reporters speaking with the House Speaker and the Senate President, who are really the people who control the purse strings here. And they pointed out that they won't know more until they get their hands on the budget. They'll put it through hearings, and that's the constant refrain of the House Speaker Joe Shekarchi that we'll let the hearing process play out and see where the budget goes from there. But really, they are the directors and the producers and they're the whole ball of wax when it comes to determining how we're going to spend state money. And, oftentimes in the past, as you point out, there's a revenue estimating conference that comes up in May, looks at the latest figures as far as revenues are concerned, and they call it caseloads, what the expenditures are going to be like. So oftentimes it's a slightly better picture come May than it was back in November when they first went through this exercise. They do it twice a year. So not oftentimes, but in recent times, notwithstanding cuts on the federal level, the diminution of federal assistance under post-COVID aid and that sort of thing. So it could be a far different picture in a few months.
Kind of back to the speech and from a thematic standpoint, from your perspective, how much of this was a political speech directed to Democrat primary voters, and how much of this was really McKee trying to set forth an agenda that, from not just the affordability standpoint of constituents, but from an affordability standpoint, or from a even just from a broad fiscal standpoint, this is the McKee doctrine, if you will. We're going to invest in jobs, we're going to invest in education, and we're going to do this through a variety of instruments, including bonds. That's more practical on the ground in a way. That's more operations of government. But he paired this with this strong anti-Trump rhetoric and an appeal to a lot of core constituents of the Democrat Party, especially those primary voters.
It's kind of where he has to go, isn't it? If he hopes to, if he hopes to get the party nomination, and which is not assured, really. I mean, his approval ratings are quite low. I don't know if he's vying with President Trump in that regard, but they both have poor approval ratings from the public. So, really he has to be open to new things. And I think he has. I think, he had a long laundry list of programs that he wants to fund, be it through bonds or direct appropriations and that sort of thing. And that appeals to a lot of different constituencies. Is it enough? Is it enough to offset what could be strong challenges, both from primarily from a primary standpoint?
Yeah.
We'll see.
What are you looking for today that the Department of Administration, as the budget is presented? Is there anything, for example, we didn't hear this on Tuesday night, tax the rich, the so-called millionaires tax, but we understand that's going to be included in the budget. Anything, and are you looking for that and anything else that is similar that's kind of a major policy introduction that was just not included in the speech?
It is. I don't know what that's going to generate in terms, because we don't know, what the figures would be, what the percentages would be, and so forth. What tax the rich will look like exactly, because there's that could cover a wide range. It's not going to make up a shortfall, whatever it is.
Right.
And on the other hand, it's not going to drive a lot of people out of Rhode Island. It's, there are a good number of wealthy individuals in the state. Some derive their income from from salary and so forth. They're not going to drive a lot of those people out of the state. And I think I'm expecting it'll be in there. It'll be part of the governor's budget. I think the legislature is primed to go along with it to a certain extent. Will they take the numbers that Governor McKee's budget advances remains to be seen. But it's not a cure, I think. You look at the outside analysts who look at the budget and thinking of economists and others, and we're still in trouble, still in significant shortfall in the hundreds of millions of dollars to close a budget gap that has to be balanced by the 1st of July.
When you look at this year's State of the State and you think about the travel of McKee, going back to when he was lieutenant governor, of course, we were there during COVID, you and I in the reporters pool, as McKee was basically shut out of the Raimondo administration's handling of COVID. Now, 5 years later, he's governor. And he did seem to me to be more in the zone during this speech. He seemed to be a little bit looser. He's never been, put it this way, he's never been a guy who's going to win the Spoken Word Album of the Year Grammy. But when you look at McKee, is McKee in a commanding position right now, or is he not even talking about polls, just attitude? Did you get the sense in the chamber that McKee is the leader of the Democrat Party in Rhode Island right now?
That's two different things here, Bill. He had a more commanding presence, I thought, that he has in the past. Does he command the party? That's a pretty good question, because the party is pretty all-encompassing in Rhode Island. I mean, the Democratic Party is really the elephant in the room.
Right, the donkey in the room.
Mixing my metaphors here, but not the donkey in the room. But I don't necessarily think that he's the kingmaker that a party leader has to be. Look at the Republicans; they lost their party chairman just a week ago.
Right, Joe Powers.
Yep. Stepping aside as chairman of the Republican Party because they've had so much ongoing futility and no sign of improvement there. So the Democrats cover a lot of ground, and from a very conservative wing to a very progressive wing. Does he bring them together? I don't think we've seen signs of that.
Yeah. Last question. As we look at, again, kind of just not even from a numbers standpoint, because we won't know the numbers really in totality until later this year. So it's sort of all speculation and historic analysis, if you will, applying this here. But do you see any constituency within the Democratic Party right now in Rhode Island, be it a core group of elected officials in the House or Senate, be it outside influences that are strong, certain unions, so on and so forth? Do you see anybody stepping in and saying, okay, we're going to move our support to another candidate within the Democrat Party, not because of McKee's polling numbers, not because of the Washington Bridge or anything like that, but because of what they heard at the speech? Is there anything that would resonate with core constituencies to say, okay, this isn't the agenda that we want our party to be a part of? Or were there so many shout outs and possible programs for major supporters that they're going to say, all right, even if we don't like X, Y, Z, we get ABC, and we're going to continue to support McKee as a result of this speech?
Notwithstanding the small group of people that turn out to the State House the night of the speech, very earnest and good-meaning people who provide an alternative view of state spending and state priorities, I don't think we can ever look toward a State of the State speech to set, it may set the tone for how the incumbent, and I'm going beyond Governor McKee at the moment, it may set the tone for how the incumbent views their marching orders and how they're going to conduct their business. But I don't know that it sways a lot of people. I don't know that it brings a lot of people on board. You have the shout outs to people who, fit in with the governor's agenda. That's always been the case. I'm in what if I covered 5, 6 governors? That's always been the case. So you're not changing a lot of hearts or minds with the one speech. And, it's your one time to shine in prime time. And I'm not talking about Governor McKee, who's a well-meaning, he's a good guy. Everybody, well-liked for the most part. But, I don't think we can look to the speech as the table setter necessarily beyond the little corner office in the second floor of the State House.
Steve Klamkin, you can find his reporting through Latino Public Radio here in Rhode Island and also his own photographs across the board.
LPR.org.
LPR
News. LPRnews.org.
LPRnews.org. There it is. Thanks for joining us on Bartholomew Town. We're here for you every Tuesday and Thursday, wherever you get podcasts, and on ripodcast.com. I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk soon. Bartholomew Town is brought to you by Navigant Credit Union, Half Street Group, the University of Rhode Island Online, and Newport Film.